Mrs. Brienne was stunned when she entered Lola's room. She was unable to move and felt an intense fear. She wondered if the little girl hanging from the ceiling was her daughter or someone else. Lola, her daughter, was crawling her head down the ceiling of her room like a spider. She had long and tight hands and feet. Her hair was very long and white, and her teeth were disguised, similar to those of a vampire, while her tongue was moving like a snake's, and her eyes were red, injected with blood. "Who are you, and what have you done to my daughter?" she asked, after gathering all the courage she could find. Her voice trembled, betraying her intense fear. Lola remained silent, without answering her mother, and began to slowly crawl towards her. Mrs. Bryant quickly ran away from the room, crying in terror, as if she had just seen a ghost. Her husband, Mr. Bryant, was in the living room, watching the news at the end of the evening when he heard his wife calling for help. He immediately got up and ran towards the direction where his voice was coming from. They ran across each other, and Mrs. Bryant was breathing very hard. "She's coming. She wants to kill me. Help me. Save me," she said, always in a breath. Mr. Bryant was very confused. The last thing he remembered was that Mrs. Bryant wanted to check on her daughter Lola before going to bed. So he asked her who's coming. "Who wants to kill you?" She hid behind him, pointing at the door of their daughter's bedroom, trembling and unable to say a word. Mr. Bryant thought that a dangerous animal was in their daughter's bedroom, so he ran to the kitchen to bring a machete. Together, they slowly moved towards their daughter's bedroom, but to Mrs. Bryant's greatest surprise, Lola lay down on the bed, sleeping peacefully. The color of her hair and nails had become normal again. Mrs. Bryant was very confused. She was certain of what she had seen earlier and began to feel as if she had gone mad. Mr. Bryant turned around the room to discover what had scared his wife, but he found nothing. He simply sighed and blamed his wife for disturbing his evening schedule. Then he returned to the living room to continue what he was doing. Mrs. Bryant stayed in the room for a few minutes, watching her daughter Lola sleep, but she was extremely confused because she was certain of what she had seen a few minutes earlier. After waiting a moment, she left the room and locked the door. When returning to the living room, she began to remember all the things that the nun she had hired in the past had told her before she quit despite the high salary. And if she told the truth about Lola, that she was a demon, and if she didn't lie, Mrs. Bryant asked to join her husband, Mr. Bryant, at the salon. Mrs. Bryant and Mr. Bryant had met and had fallen in love many years ago. Then they had married. However, when they got married, Mr. Bryant was still a young man in trouble who owned a grocery store, while his wife was a student in nursing care and worked part-time in a pharmacy. They didn't have much money, but they were very happy together. A few years after their marriage, they were blessed with a very beautiful daughter, whom they called Lola. Lola grew up to become so adorable and beautiful that all their neighbors loved her and admired her. Every time people saw her, they often offered her gifts and money. When her mother realized that many people admired and adored her daughter, she began to use Lola to get things from others. Every time she needed something from her neighbors, she sent Lola to ask for it, knowing that she would not refuse if it was Lola who asked. She also had the habit of asking people for things when she visited friends or neighbors with Lola. If she saw something that she liked, she would say, "Wow, I love your bag. Lend it to me to go to church on Sunday." Or, "Your dress is really pretty. Lend it to me for a friend's birthday." Lola often saw her mother do that, but her mother didn't know that her daughter was learning by watching her. A few years later, Mr. Bryant was lucky enough to sign a contract with an Italian furniture company. They loved the furniture he made and offered him a contract of several million naira. Mr. Bryant and his wife, Madam Bryant, became rich in a blink of an eye. Mr. Bryant built a large showroom for his furniture as he continued to have international clients, and he also built a large pharmacy for his wife, Madam Bryant, in recognition of his support and patience during their modest beginnings. They began to live in luxury, and Lola was enrolled in a prestigious school called Queen's Reserve for the Rich. However, Lola had gotten used to seeing her mother giving things to people, and this habit had become a second nature for her, despite the fact that her parents had now enough money to buy her everything she wanted. At school, Lola often asked her classmates to give her their snacks and chocolate. After her parents had become rich, they didn't have much time for her, and often hired a nanny to take care of the house and the children because they were rarely at home during the day. Lola had a best friend at school called Chelsea. They became friends from day one because they sat side by side in class. Unlike Lola, Chelsea's parents were not rich. Her father was a small merchant, and her mother taught in a public school. However, Chelsea was very bright and smart, which gave her a scholarship to study at Queen's College. Chelsea's parents raised her in an exemplary way, teaching her to be happy with what she had and to avoid vanity. Every time she came home with gifts or objects that didn't belong to her, her parents asked her to give them back to their owner. When Lola offered biscuits and other snacks to Chelsea, she politely refused by thanking her. This annoyed Lola a lot because she didn't understand why Chelsea refused to accept anything from her even though they were very close. Unlike Chelsea, once Lola had finished eating all the snacks she had brought to school, she would only order the snacks from other children. Chelsea often advised her against these behaviors, but Lola could not see anything wrong with what she was doing. Why do you always ask for snacks from other children when you already bring yours to school? Why are you not satisfied with what you have? Often asked Chelsea. Lola always said that asking or accepting other people's things was not a bad thing. After all, he gave them to him because they were nice. One day, a new student was admitted to Queen's College. Her name was Mara. Mara was an older student, respected by all the other students. However, Mara had not come to Queen's College just to study. She had a hidden mission. She lived with her evil mother, which belonged to a witch's coven. One of the main activities of their coven was to initiate young children and to take over their star and destiny. Mara had been a precious instrument for her mother-in-law, bringing her young children to the coven. Every child she brought, her mother-in-law generously rewarded her. Mara was very jovial, and only a week after her arrival at Queen's College, who was never satisfied and did not pay attention to Chelsea's warnings. Mara noticed that Chelsea was different from other children at school. She admired Chelsea's intelligence and dedication, and often wondered why she always refused offers from others, even when she seemed hungry. Mara carefully observed Chelsea and noticed that she was a very bright and special child. When Mara spoke of Chelsea to her grandmother and her difference, this last one examined in depth Chelsea's fate and discovered that she had a brilliant star and a great destiny. She then said to Mara, "I want you to do everything in your power so that this girl can eat something that comes from you voluntarily. If you succeed, I will take you to the market and buy you everything you want, as well as your favorite snacks." Mara was very happy and decided that she would do everything to gain Chelsea's trust and become her close friend. However, Mara was very disappointed because she found it very difficult to win Chelsea's heart. Unlike other children in the school, Chelsea had a hard time feeling comfortable in Mara's presence. One day, Mara discovered that the next day would be Chelsea's birthday, and she decided to use this opportunity to get closer to her. She informed her mother, and she did some incantations to find out personal information about Chelsea. She discovered her favorite chocolate, so Mara bought a pack of this chocolate and offered it to Chelsea. When she was alone in class during the recreation, she took the chocolate out of her backpack and handed it to Chelsea. Chelsea was very surprised and shocked at the same time. It was her favorite chocolate, which was also very expensive, and that her parents only bought it occasionally. She was even more surprised that Mara knew her favorite chocolate, but she thought it was just a coincidence. "I love you, Chelsea, and I would like to be your friend. Take this chocolate as a birthday present from me. Happy birthday." Chelsea thanked Mara for her kindness and generosity, but she did not want to accept the chocolate, so she refused politely. However, Mara insisted that Chelsea take it. Then Chelsea took the chocolate and put it on the table. Mara looked at it anxiously, hoping that Chelsea would eat the chocolate immediately. But she was disappointed when Chelsea continued to read her book. Mara told her that she would see herself later and left the classroom, hoping that Chelsea would still eat the chocolate. Chelsea had no intention of eating it right away. She wanted to show it to her parents first. As soon as Mara left the classroom, Lola entered the classroom. She informed Chelsea that one of the teachers needed to see her. Chelsea left the classroom to see the teacher, but when she returned from the teacher's office, she found Lola eating the chocolate. Chelsea was very disappointed with Lola. She explained that it was a birthday present from Mara and that she wanted to show it to her parents before opening it. Lola simply laughed and said, "What good is it to show it to your parents if they ask you to eat it anyway?" Meanwhile, Mara's mother looked at Lola through an evil mirror. She saw Lola eating the chocolate that had been specially prepared for Chelsea. Her mother became very angry with Lola for having spoiled their plan and decided to punish her by turning her into a dangerous animal every night after having taken her star and initiated it in the cove. Since that day, Lola often began to have nightmares where she saw herself in the forest, sitting among other girls of her age in red dresses. Every time she woke up, she was soaked in sweat. When she tried to talk to her parents about what she was going through in her dreams, she asked him to wait for them to come back from work. But when he came back, he told her that they were tired and asked her to wait until the next day. Lola thought that it would stop with dreams, but a few weeks later, things got worse and became uncontrollable. The housekeeper heard noises coming from Lola's room. She became suspicious and thought that someone had broken into the house. As Lola was a deep sleeper who usually only woke up in the morning, the housekeeper paced up to the door of Lola's room and put her ear to the door to listen to what was going on inside. She began to hear children's voices, the crying of newborn babies, and the laughter of elderly men and women. Shocked by her strange voice, she slowly opened the door and entered. Inside, she was traumatized by a frightening vision. She saw a creature with several heads, hands, legs, and a tail. The animals' heads were that of several children, including Lola's. It was as if a dozen children had been merged into one body. The domesticated, terrified, remained frozen, unable to understand what her eyes saw. The scene was indescribable horror. Suddenly, she realized that she had no control over her hands and legs. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The creature, white and dangerous, slowly approached her, using her tail to surround the neck of the domestic and tried to strangle her. Unable to move, she struggled to breathe. Suddenly, Lola heard her mother's voice calling the maid. She immediately released her grip around her neck, giving her control of her hands and legs. The maid ran away from the room as fast as possible, past Mrs. Bryant, and ran out of the house. Mrs. Bryant followed her, asking, "What's wrong? Why are you running? Where were you? I was calling you." The maid, out of breath and her face marked by fear, "Your daughter is a witch, a demon. She tried to strangle me. I can't work for you anymore. I only care about your dirty money." Mrs. Bryant didn't believe her ears. She thought the housekeeper was crazy and told her, "How dare you treat my daughter like a demon? Are you crazy? Get your things and leave my house, so you never come back." The maid walked away, without even thinking about her things left behind, because she was too afraid to return home. Mrs. Bryant looked at her carefully and noticed marks on her neck, but she didn't pay attention to it, too angry to analyze the situation. Mrs. Bryant will finally open her eyes to the true nature of her daughter Lola. Little Lola will finally get rid of this demonic spirit that torments her. Can extreme greed and greed lead us to the end? Let's find out in the second and last episode. But first, don't hesitate to subscribe, to like, and to comment by telling us which country you're watching us from. See you soon.